So we have Carol Roth on in this hour of the Broad and Podcast. We have been talking about the FedNow system and how that system by itself is not anything to do with the digital dollar. However, it does make the digital dollar, should they introduce it, more effective. And they could settle in real time, just like Bitcoin now can do. And so it's important that you know that this is a needed step for the modern world. However, I don't trust them on anything that they do. So when they say, no, this is it, that's all we're doing, don't believe that. Don't believe that. But understand the FedNow system is different than a digital dollar. We have Carol Roth, and before we get into this next thing, Carol, I want to share with you an experience I had with a friend the other day, and this friend has been somebody who will come to me and say, okay, better, worse, or about the same. And they've not wanted to look at things because they were hoping that I was wrong. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope we find a way to turn this around. I don't think we're going to, just based on past performance, but we could. And they've kind of wanted to not be so freaked out by it. And I understand that. But they said something to me that I immediately connected with. And I think it's important to say to you, the audience, that because you might go through this and don't fear it. There was a time that I used to say off air when we were back, this is probably 2011, when everything was really coming clear on the path that we were on. And I used to say every day when I'd get off the air, I'd say, I just burst out in tears. And I'd say, I feel like I'm watching my child smothered in a crib and I can't do anything and no one will listen to stop it. And it was just trauma every day because I loved my country and I saw that we are headed in exactly the wrong way and no one will do anything. And this is intentional. So I went through that period, but I got past it. And I realize now that is just one of the phases of grief. You are going to go through grief as we lose some of the things that we have always traditionally known. It's better to do it now than it is when the time comes. You won't have time for the grief then. People will be grieving. You have to help them. You have to be logical and think your way through everything. So embrace it. Learn. Get your morning over with so you're strong and back up on your feet when these things come. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would like to share too. I have gone through that personally. My husband has gone through that personally. This is something that everybody who has been following this is part of the process. You see, you called it, smothering the baby. For me, it was the train, in slow motion going off the tracks and feeling like you can't stop it. And the reality is we may not be able to stop the train from going off the tracks, but I can personally take shelter. That's what you have to do. You cannot panic here. You have to prepare and say, what is it I can do? I might not be able to, stop the new financial world order, right? That's a huge, tall order. But what can I do in my life to make myself more secure, to make myself more prepared, that if things go badly, that at least I know I can get through that difficult period. My family, my friends can do that. And, the more people you educate and work with together on a community level, I think the more opportunities you're going to have to share, to cope, to work together. So it really is about taking that personal responsibility and controlling the piece that you can.
And I think this is really important. You bring up the train. I like that a lot because if you're on the train, you need to prepare. You need to secure yourself and prepare for impact. That is critically important. If you're watching the train, you're not on the train, you see it coming, you need to say, get blankets, call the ambulance, get some doctors here, we're going to need help. So you prepare whether you're on it or off it. And that's critical. And I believe that's what this audience is meant to be. those people that help others. Okay, so let me go back to the Fed. We were talking about what is coming. And honestly, I have had people say to me, Glenn, we can sell our national parks. I'm like, what? I don't want to sell our national parks. And they've said, we're off the gold standard. We're off the oil. But we've got all kinds of things we could back a dollar with. I don't like any of the solutions that they would come up with. However, they've come up with another solution, and it is called modern monetary theory. And I've explained it in one of my books, I think 2 of my books. It's important to understand, but the gist of it is the government can spend as much as it wants, and they can print as much money. Now, you would say, well, what about inflation? They say, as long as we can control the spending down to the level of the individual. This is why it's never worked, because they've had to do mass things like, raise the finance rates, raise the loan rates. And that just doesn't work. And you're playing, it's not an accurate science, and it's behind the spending. So you're always playing catch up, or you're prognosticating, and that's always bad. This, a digital currency, can actually stop the spending today on certain products. It can also then ration today without having to have some system that everybody has to know. That's their way out of the inflation that we are going to have to print and the Fed is going to have to buy and put on their books. Do you agree or disagree, Carol?
So I will say that's what they believe to be their way out of inflation, perhaps. Yes, I call MMT magic money tree, because it's a theory that people who believe in unicorns and all that kind of stuff believe in. And so, they say that there's an element of control there. And that's why real modern monetary theory has never been tried, even though every time it's been tried, it hasn't worked. But they are looking for that element of control. And what you have to understand, imagine that every dollar that you had in your pocket had a microchip in it, and that somebody could track everything that you do. And regardless of whether it's that they want to control you from a social credit standpoint, or they want to control you from a monetary theory standpoint, they can make the decisions to let you access that money that is yours, that is supposed to be, by the way, a proxy for your productivity. Glenn, you mentioned what backs the U.S. dollar. What backs the U.S. dollar is American productivity and ingenuity. Correct. That's the backing of it. That's what it's supposed to stand for. But every time that you say, okay, productivity is equal to this unit of money, and then you go and you print more money, well, you've just devalued that equation. Mm-hmm. So that is what they're going to do, and they're going to try to use that as a conduit to get themselves out of it, which, by the way, won't work, because there are things called logic and reason and math. Yes. And it doesn't line up with any of them.
Yes, but it will give them control. And people will say, that's a conspiracy theory. Let me play something from Christine Lagarde from the French Central Bank, their Federal Reserve. Listen to this exchange she's having with somebody she thinks is Vladimir Zelensky. Listen to this.
There are many protests in Europe against the electronic euro. Now, the problem is they don't want to be controlled. They don't want to...
Yeah, but you know what? Now we have in Europe this threshold. Above 1,000 euros, you cannot pay cash. If you do, you are on the gray market. So you take your risk. You get caught, you are fined, or you go in jail. But the digital euro is going to have a limited amount of control. There will be control. You're right. You're completely right. Mm. We are considering whether for very small amounts, anything that is around 300, 400 euros, we could have a mechanism where there is zero control. But that could be dangerous. The terrorist attacks on France back 10 years ago were entirely financed by those very small anonymous credit cards that you can recharge in total anonymity.
Unbelievable. So there will be control, but we're going to let people have like $500 that they could spend that won't be tracked. But we're not sure, because that's the way terrorists would use it. That's total control.
Let me read you another thing. So this is from this is on, by the way, on the White House's website, so I can tweet out the link to it. But in March of 2021, President Biden made remarks to the Business Roundtable, which is, all of the major company CEOs in the United States, and said, I believe that we are at an inflection point in the world economy, not just the world economy, in the world. It occurs every 3 or 4 generations, ... And now is a time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there. And then he says, and we've got to lead it. And the question you have to ask yourself is, who is we? Because I'm pretty sure, Glenn, that you're not in the we, I'm not in the we, your listeners aren't in the we. It's all of those people who are working together to control, to jockey, to position themselves to control every finite resource out there, because they see it. They have told us they see this shift is happening. And they're working. All these things that are happening are working so that they can work to control every resource and make sure you will own nothing. That is where that comes from.
We're with Carol Roth. Carol, you stay with me one more break, because the number one question that is coming in from listeners for you is, should I pay off all my debts? What should I do? Because if you're right, inflation, like you can't believe, is coming through. So what does that mean? Get that answer from you here in just a second. Carol Roth is with us now. She is the author of the new book, You Will Own Nothing. It is based on the Great Reset and what is coming in our country. It is also a great companion book. Comes out about the same time with my book called Dark Future. I show all of the things that are in place and planning now for the second phase of the Great Reset that'll boggle your mind. But she goes down and gets into the nitty gritty on what should you do and what is coming. So let's go there, because one of the real questions, I hear this all the time. Why don't I just go out and buy a bunch of stuff, because then I could have a loan at a low interest rate and then I'll pay it off with inflated dollars? That seems scary.
So people sometimes don't differentiate between debt that is used for spending and debt that is used for investing. There's good and bad debt. You don't want to be taking on debt for your spending, but you want to be able to use it productively for an investment if you can get a better return on your investment than the cost that you have to pay from the debt by using it. One of the reasons people take out debt for a house over time, right? So that's one of the big questions that I've been getting. And there seems to be a lot of confusion about what happens to debt if everything goes south and we end up in hyperinflation. People are saying, we end up in this hyperinflation scenario. Does it make sense for me to pay off my debt now? And so I just kind of want to walk through the thought process on this. If the dollar loses purchasing power, it's actually good for your fixed rate debt. So assuming your house has a fixed interest rate on it and you have a fixed amount of debt, let's say, as an extreme example, the prices of everything doubled due to the dollar degradation. Well, then your debt is really, in a sense, worth half as much as it was today in the future. So, you have to be thinking about it in that sense. Do you really want to take something out of your investments and pay that down as a solution if your debt is going to have, be quote unquote worth less in the future on a relative basis? So again, I'm not a financial advisor. This isn't financial advice, but just giving people things to think through, because your audience is so fabulous. They send me questions all the time. And that is one of the big areas of misunderstanding is, what should I do? Now, paying down debt from a behavioral standpoint is always a good thing. Paying down debt on your spending is always a good thing, but something that's for an investment, if you're worried about what happens to it during hyperinflation, it's actually the inverse of what you're thinking.
Carol, thank you. How do people contact you, by the way?
Yeah, so carolroth.com is there's a contact form there. And then, as you had mentioned, the new book, You Will Own Nothing, is on pre-order. Companion people are buying yours and mine together. And like you said, that the most important thing is mine does have that action plan. You learn all the things that are happening, like you're learning in your book, Dark Future, but how to fight back. This is about how you can actually own everything. This isn't a scare tactic. The idea is to inform and make sure that you own everything. We want you to still be able to have the American dream.
That is so important. Our books really do make a good companion to each other. We've kind of worked on them kind of in a way, that way.
Together, yes.
So you can understand the big picture, know what's real, what's not real, and then what do I do about it? The book, mine is Dark Future. You can order it now. Hers is You Will Own Nothing by Carol Roth. Order them together wherever you buy your books. Carol, thank you so much.
Thanks as always, Glenn.
God bless.